Welcome to Assembly Calendar. I'm Mike Friesen, and with us for our program today, Assemblyman Will Barclay. Will Barclay represents the 120th Assembly District. The 120th includes Oswego, Onondaga, and Jefferson counties. We want to thank you folks all across the region for tuning in for our program today. Will Barclay, nice to see you.
Nice to be here. Mike, I'm impressed you're able to mention my new district.
It is. It's a new number.
It is.
And the counties are a little bit different.
Yeah, so essentially in my new district, I take a lot more of Oswego County. In fact, I have all the counties except for 3 towns.
That was always your favorite anyway, wasn't it?
Well, it's where I live, so I don't say favorite. I don't have any favorites, but I do
have you walked right into that
some
one.
loyalty just because I live there. But I still keep part of Onondaga, Lysander, the town of Lysander, and then I go up and have the town of Ellisburg and Jefferson. So
there you go.
It's actually a little bit more compact, but I lose a lot of Onondaga County. But yeah, I'm excited about representing this new district.
And that's all. That's a change that comes about every 10 years. The powers that be look at the state as a whole, and it redraws all the Assembly, the Senate, the congressional districts because of shifts in the population.
Right. I think all the districts are slightly bigger. It's about 132,000, maybe 133,000.
Which means what you're saying there is that some people have left New York State, or are you saying
no? The districts, well,
population
bigger?
bigger?
Yeah, it's bigger.
Oh, population.
Yeah. Well, New York didn't gain as many people as other states, but we definitely increased population, so like 2 or 3%.
Okay, so we're not losing.
Well, yeah, compared to the rest of the nation, we are though, because they're growing at 5 or 6%. We're growing at 2% or whatever.
Gotcha. All right.
Yeah.
So this all
and particularly upstate's tougher too.
A perspective thing. It's all on how you want to look at it, right?
Yeah.
As it is most things in life. Our charge here is to let you folks in the 120th district know what's going on at the state capitol. We are going to start off this first show of the 2013 session by giving you a little flavor for the start up of the session itself when the governor gives his State of the State address, his agenda to the people of the state of New York, the things he thinks needs to get done here in Albany. So we'll start with that. We'll get a little legislative reaction, then we'll come back and we'll be talking with Will Barclay again about what's going on here in Albany with more of today's Assembly Calendar.
The national economy is better than it was, but it's not driving recovery at a fast enough pace. Our mantle as the progressive capital is a continuing responsibility. It doesn't end. Upstate New York needs more investment and more assistance. Our children are not being educated to the fullest. Women are not treated equally and fairly by this society. And Mother Nature has not been kind to us.
I think a couple of the themes that I think I totally support with the governor: economic development, jobs, trying to revitalize upstate New York. It was very refreshing to hear. Certainly calling on Congress to quit twiddling their thumbs and get the needed aid as a result of Hurricane Sandy. So there were a lot of thematic ideas that the governor championed, but also there's going to have to be a lot of discussion about the specifics and details.
I was very happy he talked about upstate New York, talking about reviving the upstate economy. That's something that we started 2 years ago. We got to continue to work on. He talked a little bit about gun control. We'll have to look at his proposals. Some of them may go too far. I don't know if they actually will address the tragedy they had in Connecticut. He obviously talked about the Superstorm Sandy and trying to rebuild from that. I think all of us to the state, upstate, downstate, want to help New York State rebuild from that tragedy. So I look forward to working with the governor. It's a very ambitious plan. It's going to be a long and hard-working session. We really need to get these issues passed.
You mentioned the gun legislation. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on in the program. It's amazing how quickly Albany can move at certain times and yet slowly at other times. The gun bill certainly went through very quickly here in Albany at the beginning of a legislative session, very unusual. But let's start with the fiscal stuff. There's a lot of talk about economic development for upstate New York. That's unusual, I think, to hear about in a State of the State address. A lot of times people complain, oh, upstate's forgotten again.
Right. Well, I am pleased anytime the governor can talk about upstate New York. We've been struggling upstate economy for at least the last decade or more, and any focus we can get from state government on that economy, I think is a good thing. The governor, as you know, set up some regional economic development councils, I guess, year ago now, and it provides economic grants throughout the district. We have one in central New York. I think last year it was awarded something like $98 million. This year again it was awarded something like $100 million to go towards economic development. So let's just see how those play out. I got my fingers crossed that those grants really help keep moving forward with the economy upstate. The one thing I was pleased that the governor mentioned in his State of the State and his subsequent budget proposal is he generally held the line on taxes. There are no new taxes or some extenders in the budget, but that's the one thing that has been killing New York or has killed New York in the past is our either high taxes or our reputation for high taxes. So it's very hard to convince a business to move in. It just generally looks unfriendly towards business, or that's the attitude out there. So I think we're starting to change that perception out there, and I think this budget and his proposal in the State of the State, I don't think there's anything really revolutionary in there from an economic standpoint, but from my mind, from a status quo standpoint, it doesn't go in the opposite direction that I think we need to go in.
Yeah,
don't need to go in.
The budget debate, I got you. The budget debate is already underway here in Albany because the governor follows up the State of the State. He gives his budget proposal to the legislature,
right.
And already the legislature is holding the hearings that take place here in Albany every year to hear from the department heads what the impact of the governor's budget would be. And yeah, it does seem as if it's pretty much just status quo, business as usual, no major departures. But I think, and everybody mentioned it in those sound bites we heard, the governor and the minority leader, yourself, Hurricane Sandy. I mean, that's going to be a huge, black cloud kind of overlooking this entire process.
Well, yeah, of course it is, and obviously there's a lot of damage resulting from that storm that needs to be addressed. The good news is they passed the funding on the federal level. I don't know what the numbers are specifically out of our budget that's going to come from state funding versus federal funding, but the bulk of that will come out of federal funding, which is great. And
that's good news.
It's great news.
Yeah.
It is great news, and look, we've helped other areas of the country when they've had natural disasters. It's only right, for the federal government to help New York and I guess New Jersey when we have natural disasters. And the other good thing is some of this aid is not just for Sandy; it's also for last year's storm that actually affected upstate. It was Irene. It really caused some problems upstate too. So there is some money in there for that, and we got to start rebuilding down there.
It's interesting. I mean, there were some legitimate political discussions taking place in Washington with the Sandy funding and all
right.
that, and but it was interesting to hear on the talk radio and all that concept of, well, this is New York that we got to help. It's New
right.
Jersey we got to help.
Right.
It was kind of funny to see how some of the rest of this country looks at us here in the Northeast.
Well, the one thing I think is legitimate, but I don't think the delay was legitimate on it. I mean, they're talking a substantial amount of money. I think there is some legitimacy to make sure that money is being spent on actual disaster relief and not some ancillary type issues that maybe aren't really as a result of the hurricane or trying to help as a result of the hurricane. So, look, I'm pleased that they finally got it passed. We can move forward and hopefully start rebuilding on Sandy.
All right, let's now get to that gun bill that came up for debate very quickly and a vote very quickly here at the state capitol. This is, again, something the governor mentioned in his State of the State address, talked about the Newtown tragedy, of course, the shooting of the firefighters out near Rochester, the movie theater shooting in Colorado, all up for discussion. And every household, around every water cooler and every business, people are talking about these things,
right.
trying to figure out what can be done to stop these things from happening again. Well, that same kind of water cooler discussion is what took place here at the state capitol as the governor put out a bill very quickly and said to the legislature, take it up now and let's get this done.
Right. Well, going back to his State of the State, he did bring up gun control. He brought up a lot of other progressive issues that I don't necessarily agree with what he was proposing. It seems, in my mind, he's gotten a little bit more political in that compared to his past State of the State speeches where he almost solely focused on the economy, which in my mind is really where all our focus should be going. But nevertheless, gun control was one of those issues as a result of the tragedy that happened in Connecticut that he brought up in his State of the State. And you're right, immediately afterwards he put a bill forward. And I think the real, I guess, for lack of a different word, tragedy of this bill, in my mind, doesn't really address those tragedies, what we saw in Colorado or saw in Connecticut. In fact, it seems, in my mind, that it's really just a grab by the people that are against guns and want more gun control. This is their excuse to do it, and they rushed it through. So, first of all, on the merits, it's a terrible bill. It doesn't do anything, in my mind, doesn't do anything to help prevent future tragedies like we've seen. And secondly, the procedural way that it was pushed to the legislature, I think, is unfortunate because I think over the last few years, and with the governor's credit and his leadership, we have become a much more efficient, transparent state government where there's more open debate on things. I think this was a real step backwards. Step backwards for the legislature not to only have one day to really review the legislation. It was a 45-page bill, so it wasn't necessarily one paragraph type thing. A lot of stuff included in that piece of legislation, but it's also a step back. I mean, for the people that never had the public never had any kind of input on this bill. And even today I'm getting calls from my office, hey, did you guys think about this one aspect of the bill? This seems like a loophole in this part of the bill. So it's just unfortunate. I think if we took our time, we might have been able to craft some sort of, I don't know what kind of compromise, but at least try to craft a bill that might directly address some of the tragedies that we've seen in the country lately. This bill does not do it. Essentially, one, it requires to register assault weapons. Two, it bans clips. We already had a ban on clips for over 10 rounds. This one knocks it down to 7 rounds. It requires recertification of your pistol permit every 5 years, which, each one of those alone, I probably have problems with each one of those suggestions, but at least I'd be willing to compromise maybe if there's something that would be done, if we could do something about mental health maybe further, or violent video games, or whatever we can try to conclude of what was responsible for particularly the tragedy in Connecticut.
There was, for years, a tag on New York State government, the legislative and executive, of dysfunction. And the governor's been very proud of his record here and says he's getting results, and that dysfunction tag has gone away. And in his mind, the production that he's gotten out of the legislature and government has been the reason for that.
Right.
But a lot of people are looking at this task, this gun control legislation. For you folks who don't know, the process is when a bill is introduced, it has to sit on the lawmaker's desk for 3 days. And that's what didn't happen here. The governor circumvented that by issuing what's known as a message of necessity, which means the legislature should take it up right away. That's what happened. And so you didn't have those 3 days for the public, the press to look at it, for the legislature to look at it.
And who knows what the motives are. I never question people's motives. I always
Never?
like to think, well, my own maybe once in a while, but or yours, for example.
Yeah, mine, yeah, sure.
But, certainly, if you can certainly get the impression that it was done for political reasons as opposed to good policy reasons, there's no rush not to wait the 3 days. There's no reason not to have some sort of public input on the thing. It sounds like very similar like they did on the federal level with Obamacare. Kind of shoot it through, pass it because you think you got the votes without maybe having a full venting of it. And certainly, I think when we're talking about the Second Amendment rights, a bill that presumably, can pull back on some of those rights, I think we should be very careful and take our time to make sure that whatever we do is very well crafted. I mean, one just great example of a problem with a bill, it doesn't exempt law enforcement on. So law enforcement now is limited to a 10 or 7 round, clip. Which is just unfortunate. There seems like such a ridiculous thing.
And that's just a mistake. It wasn't intended to do that,
Right.
but because it got rushed through, and so it's expected there's going to be all of these what are known as chapter amendments
Right.
or changes where this hastily constructed bill will now need to be changed.
And this still hasn't come yet. We heard, it'll be next week. We just get a quick cleanup, and now it's 2 weeks past the bill being passed. We still haven't seen these cleanup type bills yet. So I assume they're going to come, but it's a little problematic, while we wait in the meantime. And again, if this was done in the proper procedural way, maybe we wouldn't have these issues going forward. But one thing, I guess, if there's any good news out of this thing, my constituents are now like a laser focused on Albany and stuff we're doing down here as a result of this gun control bill. I've gotten more mail, telephone calls, emails to my office about this issue versus any other issue I've had since I've been in the Assembly. So I think from my mind, it's good that people all of a sudden are saying, hey, look what our state government's doing. Look, it's taking away our rights, it's taking away our guns. It's making criminals out of law-abiding citizens. This is problematic. And the only message I would have, please keep track of all the stuff we're doing. And gun control is just one issue. There's a lot of other issues go down here that we need that kind of passion about, and demonstrating that, hey, you guys shouldn't be doing this, or we need a better process.
That is good news. We've always said that on the show. An engaged electorate is what we need to have here, so people know what's going on in Albany and will make good decisions at the voting booths. We're out of time. Will Barclay, thanks for joining us.
Mike.
Always a pleasure. Thank you folks too, and we will hope to see you all soon for our next edition of Assembly Calendar.